Hey everyone, Pastor George here, and I am in the upper room at our church for our Wednesday Bible study video because we are getting work done on our downstairs area, our fellowship hall. So, one, just pray for that because we want it to go well. So, just pray that it goes well and that the work is done well and that we won't have any more problems with flooding and all this other type of stuff because it's been a kind of a hassle for us. But today we started our first in-person Bible study, right? So I was meeting with people up here and we talked today about Philippians. So we're going to be going through Philippians. And for you, if you want to, pause this video and go read what we read and then come back or whatever, we read Philippians verses 1 through 18. So we did the beginning of chapter 1. I'm going to break it into two sections. And mostly today I talked about the context of what was going on at the time. I already erased it, but I had a little map of Greece on the board and stuff like that. So Philippi is a town in Greece, right? It's a site of a major battle. So lots of Roman veterans lived there. Actually, it was one of the cities that was more Roman than Greek at the time. And if you were to go to the archaeological site today, you'll find, like things like Roman temples to Roman gods and things like that. So it was Greek speaking and Latin speaking. So it's actually kind of interesting for that reason. But the big thing that we talked about as a theme for Philippians, and this is going to carry throughout, is encouragement. Because if you look at this letter and you look at what Paul is writing, you'll see that it's really based on encouragement, right? He's encouraging the Philippians. He's very proud of the work that they've been doing, how they've really been striving for the gospel. But even for Paul, it's about encouragement in his circumstances. So if you were to read 1 through 18, you'll notice that he greets them. And then he moves into a time of thanksgiving and praise, which is very encouraging. And then he has this really interesting section at the end where he's talking about how how he, even in his imprisonment, is finding a good reason to share the gospel with other people, right? So he is talking especially about the Imperial Guard, the Praetorian Guard, who is watching him because he's like a political prisoner, right? He's not just like a normal prisoner. And so he's being able to speak to them. And he also is able to speak with other people who are there, right? One person in our class referred to it as a captive audience, and I think that's very, very accurate to Paul's situation. And so I can't go into everything we talked about, obviously, but what we should take away from this is the encouragement that Paul gives, and to think about like how we can be an encouragement to other people in our lives, right? So what you'll notice about Paul and about especially godly people in these other circumstances is that they are able to take these situations and turn them so that even though it looks bad on paper or whatever, they actually are being quite, fulfilled, right? That they actually are living a very happy and joyful life because they're living into the life that God has called them, right? And they know that God's plans have a higher purpose beyond what they were actually, what they're actually struggling with, right? So they see it as just a stepping stone on the way. So that was the major first point we talked about. The second point, and which maybe if you've read it, you have some questions about this as well, is what do you make of that final part where Paul is talking about these other people preaching the gospel, right? Sometimes it talks about pretensions or false things or something like that, depending on your translation. And so it could be like, what is that referring to? Well, we talked about this today. So it's not referring to people who are preaching a false gospel, right? That's not who it's referring to. Paul doesn't go easy on them. If you want to see an example of that, you can see Galatians. Really what this is talking about other preachers, missionaries, whoever, who are preaching about the gospel, but they're kind of doing it to spite Paul or become greater than him or anything like this. And if you want an example of that in Scripture, you can go to 1 Corinthians chapters 1 and 2, where Paul mentions these other people who have kind of shown up in Corinth and supplanted him, right? Because they're better preachers than he is. And he's not mad at the Corinthians for that, but he cautions them about certain things and how they should be careful, right? Don't be led away just by these types of people, but make sure that what they're speaking is true, right? So Paul right here is saying, well, if people are going to be preaching, even if they're preaching just to take over my space or just to get to spite me or to become greater than I am, even though those might be selfish motives and bad pretensions to do something, Paul's fine with it, because as long as the gospel is being preached, Paul doesn't really care, right? As people are being saved, it doesn't matter if it's him doing it or other people doing it. So it's really interesting there, right? And that's kind of what people had questions about. Was it, who are these people? So it's not people who are teaching a false gospel, right? That Jesus isn't God or something like that, or that you have to work to earn your salvation, right? No, that's not what Paul is interacting with here. It's really just people that are jealous or want to become greater than Paul. And even though those might not be good motives to preach, people are still being saved. So to Paul, it doesn't really matter. And it really turns us back towards the encouragement part, where we're learning that, yeah, Paul is still encouraged in this situation, even though he's like losing space or losing territory or whatever to others, right? Because ultimately, it's about the gospel going out and people hearing the good news. So in short, those are the two main things that we took out of Philippians 1 through 18 this morning. If you have any questions, feel free to send me anything, and I would love to answer them for you. This is kind of how I'm going to be doing these. So they're going to be short breakdowns of major things we talked about rather than the very long videos. But I hope for you guys who are listening at home, this is still good food for thought and maybe like a devotional almost to read along with your listen along with when you do a Bible study. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday, and I'll see you tomorrow for my mailbag. Peace out.